Hello and welcome to Introduction to Epistemology, and today we are going to discuss basic source of belief, justification and knowledge. And as we all know that the sources are very important for all these three things, and the source which it come from are perceptual in nature. It could be memorial or introspective or a priori or inductive or testimony based beliefs. We already discussed about the perception, and we give one example about the grassy green field. And if you see a green field having grass and the sky is blue and then there is a lake around there, then how can we perceive these things and which are the senses are involved? So we already discussed this in another video before. Then about memorial, we already discussed that our memory, brain is also important, and brain played an important role in storage and decision making in memory. And we already discussed in our previous lecture that where the memory have been stored, and so I'm not going to repeat again. Then we're talking about introspective, which is also we discussed before, and that introspective I already mentioned another definition taken from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, where defined as the process by which someone come to form belief about her own mental state. We might form the belief that someone is happy on the basis of perception. For example, by perceiving her behavior, if a person typically does not have to observe her own behavior in order to determine whether she is happy, rather one makes this determination by introspecting. So in simple words, introspective is to tell or to observe or to look on yourself about you. If you are happy and you are happy or you are sad, and you determine your own behavior or own mental health. Or it could be possible that someone is also looking your introspective behavior or your behavior, that if someone is happy, you can say that it because of his behavior. So this is introspective. We will discuss this in detail later on. To study more in detail introspective, let's discuss a story of Encrolis and the lion. I think you may heard about that story, that there is one lion that was living in some village or some town, and what happened that lion one day suddenly came to the village and came near to the village, and the lion was roaring very very loud, and the people in the village are very scared of that lion, that why a lion is so roaring and why he is shouting. So there is one kid which name is Androcles. He went to the jungle, and what happened that he at the night saw the lion in front of him. And what happened that the Androcles was frightened that maybe the lion will kill him, but actually when he observed the lion, he found that the lion was harmless, and actually he was in agony and he was in pain. And why he was in pain? Because of his paw was struck with one nail or one thing or any nail. And what happened then he helped the lion, and he removed the thing that causing the pain. After that, what happened, the lion will get better and then he go away. So what happened with passage of time, that Encrolis and after a few years the government of that area was not happy with Encrolis, and then the government take him into custody and give him punishment and throw him in front of the same lion that Encrolis has helped him few years before. And what happened that when the lion saw him, he was not eating him, or he was not aggressive or angry, but actually in fact that he he his expression was quite different and sound like he recognized him, and then the lion recognized him, and then what has happened, people look this thing, and after that then the government freed Anchorage and the lion, and then both live happily in future. So that's the story that everybody maybe know about that. So the point that we want to discuss about introspective is that if you see that the Anchorage, initially he thought that the lion is angry, he get frightened, and he thought that that maybe the lion will eat me. But what happened, that when he see the lion, he see introspective way that actually lion was not aggressive, but he was actually in pain because of something affecting his body. So then what happened, that he helped him. So it means that there are two things to see the introspective behavior. Like if someone see his or her own introspective behavior, like why I'm sad and depressed or disappointed. Obviously someone is disappointed because maybe he or she does not get good marks in the examination, maybe someone is depressed maybe because of some family problems. So this is introspective of your own thoughts and of your own problems. But there is also introspective in terms of the other one that is looking you. So if maybe the other one may introspective true or false, and in this case, in Anchorage case, initially he was wrong, but then when he observed and he realized that what have problem facing the lion, then his perceptive will change, and then he help, and then how the story will continue later on. So that is very important to understand the introspective behavior. We will discuss in detail. Again, this is a beginning lecture, so we will discuss in detail later on. Then we have another definition, and which is about a priori, which is actually the knowledge without experience. Actually there are two terms usually we discuss. One is a priori and then a posteriori, and the difference between two things is that a priori is without experience, whereas a posteriori is about the knowledge with experience. So I give you examples, like with a priori, without like giving example of a square or rectangle or any geometry, we don't need any experience. And I already mentioned another example, like if we want to explain a term like bachelors are unmarried, and the difference between bachelors are unhappy. So there is a difference between the two statements, and if the statement is the bachelor are unhappy, it means that obviously the experience has been involved, and maybe with that experience the statement will become changed, and then it become a term which is known as a posteriori. And another example I already put in this slide is about the Malaysian population. For example, the population of Malaysia in males is 16.8 million compared to females, which is 15.8. And if you see the information given about the live birth in 2018 and how many deaths in 2018, so you can find out that this is a knowledge that is come from the experience. Obviously with that experience, the information obviously collected from the sources, and then we have the information. So this example comes under a posteriori, whereas the example of the rectangles or square or any geometry come under the a priori example. Then we have another thing which is a source of knowledge is inductive reasoning. And to understand easily about inductive reasoning, we need to see the difference between two terms, which is inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. When we talk about inductive reasoning, it is actually act of making generalized conclusion based upon specific scenario. And there are few examples that have been given, like for example, when you decide when you will go for the work, or when you take your leave, or for example when that you observe the traffic pattern, or you decide a incentive plan for your employee based on the employee performance, or the meeting plan you change because of different reasons. So in this case, there are different specific scenarios, and in among using these specific scenarios, you will decide a generalized statement or generalized conclusion. Whereas when we talk about deductive reasoning, we are talking about backing up of generalized statement with specific scenario. Whereas in that case, that we are talking about a general statement with example, like for example, when you plan for example, for your product development, for your marketing strategy to promote your product, or you plan you develop the budget, or you plan for the investment, or you communicate with your clients. So these are the examples come under deductive reasoning, where there are some specific scenarios, and these specific scenarios is giving a general statement on your actions. Whereas when we talk about inductive reasoning, we are talking about a generalized conclusion, which is about after you look, maybe you are getting late because of the traffic, and then what you will conclude that on that reason. So that they are two different things when we compare with the inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning, and they are actually a part of the source of knowledge. Then we have another example of inductive reasoning that I put by adding, if for example we add some logic, like adding some premises. And if we see in comparison with deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning, we found that in inductive reasoning, for example, if you see, P is, you can stand for premises, and for example in inductive reasoning you see that Betty follow the Mediterranean diet, and for example you add one premises that okay, Betty is undisciplined, and then we talk about that most people regain weight after that diet. It means that we are talking about Mediterranean diet, and that Mediterranean diet can cause weight gain after eating, and we know that most people regain weight, but we add one premises more, that Betty is also undisciplined. So what will happen then? Obviously they will be adding the logic, and then we will say that okay, the conclusion will be like that Betty will be likely to regain the weight after that. So you can see in the blue section, adding the premises will either make the argument stronger, like we adding that Betty is undisciplined, so we make the argument more stronger, and then we can conclude that okay, most people regain weight, so Betty will also regain weight. So in the deductive reasoning, if we see in that on the left side, in that case you can see that the introductory premises is like same, that Betty followed a Mediterranean diet, and we add the same premises that Betty is undisciplined, but we also mentioned that people who follow Mediterranean diet will replace the butter with oil, because we know that people will gain the weight, but we change the premises that because people know that people will gain the weight, they will change the oil from replacing butter with olive oil, and then we conclude that okay, Betty will replace the butter with oil. But in that case, in deductive reasoning, you found that the addition of premises is not helpful, and actually is irrelevant, and maybe is distracting. So that's why in deductive reasoning, the addition of premises, maybe the argument will remain same, and the argument is that people will gain the weight, okay. But the thing is that in this case, the addition of premises is maybe misleading or maybe distracting, because in this scenario, in deductive reasoning, the Betty is undisciplined is not relevant, because it doesn't matter, because if Betty is disciplined or not disciplined, people will replace the diet with different items to reduce the weight. And then obviously we are not talking about that Betty will likely to regain the weight, but we are talking that Betty will replace the butter with oil. So that is an example of deductive reasoning. So this example is going to explain to explain that how can we discuss about inductive reasoning, and how can we differentiate between both terms. and obviously we will discuss in detail in our upcoming lectures. This is an introductory lecture, so these are the basic things. Then the last thing is about testimony based belief. We already discussed testimony, and we're talking about the example of eyewitness testimonies, and then obviously the philosophy of testimony is also important, in which the things that is important, like the language is important, the knowledge confluence is important, and then a person's belief is also important, and the important part in testimony is the words, gesture, and utterance that convey the belief. So obviously we will discuss the testimony, we will discuss in detail as a whole chapter in our upcoming lectures. But this is also a source of knowledge for information. And the simple example that, for example, if in criminology we often use testimonies, and we use these testimonies to determine the fact or reality of the event that has happened. So we will discuss in detail as a complete chapter later on. So thank you so much for today's lecture, and hope to see you again.